Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Om Vishnu Bhad Paramhamsa Privajagacharya Stotra Sata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini ki jai. Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai.
Jai.
ISKCON founder Charya Sri Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivashari Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mathura Dham ki jai. Navadvip Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Jagannath Swami ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande. Hare Hare. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Worship the
Hare Hare.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Devi Swami Tinamani Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Sri Sri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Devi Narayana Namaskritya Narunchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayak Nashta Praiswa Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavata Uttamastoke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. Wanting to be devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So this morning's text is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, and Text 18. Vidurastad abhipretya, Vetarastam abhasata, Rajan nigamyatam sigram, Pashedam bhayam agatam. Vidurastad abhipretya, Vetarastam abhasata, Rajan nigamyatam sigram, Pashyedam bhayam agatam. Vidurastad abhipretya, Vetarastam abhasata, Rajan nikamyatam sigram, Pashyedam bhayam agatam. Hare Krishna. Please stand.
Vidurastad abhipretya dhritarashtrabhasata Rajan nirgamyatam sigram Pasyedam abhayam agatam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Anyone else?
Vidurastat abhipretya dhritarashtram abhashata Rajan nirgamyatam shigram pasyedam bhayamagatam.
Jai.
Hare Krishna. Can you scroll up a little bit? Thank you. Vidurastad abhipretya dhritarashtam abhashata Rajam nirgayatam shingram pashyadam bhayam agatam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
विदुरस्तदभिप्रेत्य धृतराष्ट्रम् अभाषत राजन्निर्गम्यतां शीघ्रं पश्येदं भयम् आगतम्.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vidurastad apipretya Dhritarashtam abhashata Rajanirgam yatam sigram Pashyadam bayam agatam. Thank you. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay. So we'll do word for word now. Viduram Mahatma Vidura. Tat that. Abhipretya, knowing it well. Dhritarashtam, unto Dhritarashtra. Abhasata, said, Rajan, O king, Nigam yatam, please get out immediately. Shigram, without the least delay. Pasha, just see. Idam, this. Bhayam, fear. Agatam, already arrived. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra saying, my dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Cruel death cares for no one, be he Dhritarashtra or even Maharaj Yudhishthira. Therefore, spiritual instruction, as was given to old Dhritarashtra, was equally applicable to younger Maharaj Yudhishthira. As a matter of fact, everyone in the royal palace, including the king and his brothers and mother, was raptly attending the lectures. But it was known to Vidura that his instructions were especially meant for Dhritarashtra, who was too materialistic. The word Rajan is especially addressed to Dhritarashtra significantly. Dhritarashtra was the eldest son of his father, and therefore, according to law, he was to be installed on the throne of Hastinapur. But because he was blind from birth, he was disqualified from his rightful claim. But he could not forget the bereavement, and his disappointment was somewhat compensated after the death of Pandu, his younger brother. His younger brother left behind him some minor children, and Dhritarashtra became the natural guardian of them. But at heart, he wanted to become the factual king and hand the kingdom over to his own sons, headed by Duryodhana. With all these imperial ambitions, Dhritarashtra wanted to become a king, and he contrived all sorts of intrigues in consultation with his brother-in-law Shakuni. But everything failed by the will of the Lord. And at the last stage, even after losing everything, men and money, he wanted to remain as king, being the eldest uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthira. Maharaj Yudhishthira, as a matter of duty, maintained Dhritarashtra in royal honor, and Dhritarashtra was happily passing away his numbered days in the illusion of being a king or the royal uncle of King Yudhishthira. Vidura, as a saint and as the duty-bound, affectionate youngest brother of Dhritarashtra, wanted to awaken Dhritarashtra from his slumber of disease and old age. Vidura therefore sarcastically addressed Dhritarashtra as the king, which he was actually not. Everyone is a servant of eternal time, and therefore no one can be king in this material world. King means the person who can order. The celebrated English king wanted to order time and tide, but the time and tide refused to obey his order. Therefore, one is a false king in the material world. And Dhritarashtra was particularly reminded of this false position and of the factual fearful happenings which had already approached him at that time. Vidura asked him to get out immediately if he wanted to be saved from the fearful situation which was approaching him fast. He did not ask Maharaj Yudhishthira in that way because he knew that a king like Maharaj Yudhishthira is aware of all the fearful situations of this flimsy world and would take care of himself in due course, even though Vidura might not be present at that time. Oma Gena Tivirandasya, Gyana Gena Shilakaya, Chakshu Om Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha, Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale, Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadhatikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamanam Shri Guru Vaisnavam Scha. Shri Rupa Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam. Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam. Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lita Shri Vishaka Vitam Scha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhi Vrindavandeshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sundibhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namini. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavari Pastatyadi Shatari. Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gora Chiche Namaha. Ananda Lila Maya Vigrahaya Himavya Divecha Vishindaraya Tasme Mahaprema Raspadaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Hare Krishna. So the English translation, the text. Mahatma Vidura knew all this. Therefore, he addressed Dhritarashtra saying, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you." So, Hare Krishna. Vidura, Yamaraj, who had come to this material world born of Shudra, and a very elevated Vyasadeva, Mahatma Vidura knew what was about to happen. The war, the Kurukshetra war was over, and it was obvious from the Dhritarashtra's physical condition that old age had crept in, and from old age, the next thing that comes is death. And so, it is in fact true for everyone, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport. But then, Vidura knowing Dhritarashtra's mind, knowing how materialistic he was, knowing that the war situation could have been changed if he had seen reason, and if he had overruled some of the comments by Duryodhana, especially when it came to a point where Krishna just suggested 5 villages for the Pandavas and everything else in the world. Just 5 villages for Pandavas and everything else for Duryodhana still. So much envy and so much clamoring for material things wound up making the war such that Duryodhana got nothing, not even his life. And now Dhritarashtra is still sitting there, materialistic, and he doesn't want to get out. So Vidura comes and advises him, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately." Srila Prabhupada later on discusses why Mahatma Vidura called Dhritarashtra king. But he said, do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you. So fear had overtaken Dhritarashtra. Why? Well, because his rule had come to an end pretty much. And now the next thing that was coming was death. And Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, cruel death cares for no one. It doesn't matter how elevated a person is. It doesn't matter how even pure that person is. Death comes. But for devotees, death is in a different category. When a person has taken the instructions of a spiritual master seriously and tried their very best to live a decent spiritual life, then Krishna comes disguised as death to take us to a place where we'll enjoy forever, to live in bliss, to be the servant of a servant of a servant, but with everything else provided. It is the same death, that's the transition that gets us there. But for a materialistic person like Dhritarashtra, he wanted all of the adoration and distinction and profit, for that matter, all here in the material world for himself and also for his sons, and especially Duryodhana. He wanted Duryodhana to be on the throne and go on Duryodhana's children to go on taking that particular position after him. The situation was quite tense, but Maharaj Yudhishthira, because he was so well brought up, made it look simple, that he was just caring for Dhritarashtra, no matter what he had done, as an uncle that was nice. As a matter of fact, in Ramayana, same thing. Lord Ram was very, 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 very strict and very insistent that the stepmother Kaikeyi should be cared for nicely, even though he was the one that caused the husband and the father of Lord Ram to make the decision to have Lord Ram go to the forest for 14 years. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has different ways in which he performs things. And anyway, I don't want to get into Ramayana too much. There's so much that comes there. But so first thing that Vidura had noticed was that Dhritarashtra was fearful. Now, he would have been even more fearful if Maharaj Yudhishthira was the kind of person that would seek revenge. And some people do that after they've been treated badly. So, oh, now I have a position, I can just dish it out to this person who gave me so much trouble when my father died. Dhritarashtra could have been treated badly, but Yudhishthira was a pious king. Yudhishthira was a religious king, that is Sanatana Dharma. Yudhishthira was completely submitted to Krishna, and Yudhishthira was very wise, and so was Vidura. So Dhritarashtra, in that sense, was lucky to have those kind of people around him, even in his old age. So fear is something that grips a lot of people in this world. Bhayam, fear. Srila Prabhupada has commented on that in so many different situations in the Shastra. Sometimes in unfamiliar situations, actually most of the time, in situations that are unfamiliar to children, children naturally become fearful. And in unfamiliar situations, adults become sometimes very alert and sometimes fearful, depending on the person. But children definitely become fearful in situations that are unfamiliar. When a child sees that situation, and then later on they see the parent, they will run to the parent. Then the fear will change to satisfaction because of the shelter that the child believes that the parent will give him or her, the child. So when a child sees that situation where the parent is around, then even though the atmosphere or the area may be unfamiliar, the child immediately focuses on the parent, how to get the parent, and how the parent can give me protection. I will just take one mundane example that happened to my own family. It's not spiritual, that's why I'm saying it's mundane. I was not with them, my wife and the two children, they were very young at that time, both of them less than 10 years old. They were like 8 and 5, something like that. And I got a call from my wife that the car had broken down. And somehow we had got a situation, they had been pulled to a gas station, and I knew where it was. About a good 40 minutes from the house. It was quite far away. So we had a second car. So I just got in that one and drove to where they were. As soon as the children saw me pull up and they saw me get out, they started clapping their hands. Daddy has come, Daddy has come. I was surprised they did that. But they felt safe because they knew that their mother was giving them shelter, and that was all right, so they weren't lost. But somehow they had to get home, and they knew that my mom was not going to be able to get them home, because if she was, then she wouldn't have called me. They'd be on their way home. So somehow they believed that the father, like I'm some magician, was going to pull something for them to go home. So this is the belief. That's why the children teach us these things so well. Krishna says, Sarva dharma parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha ishami mascha. I will save you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Just surrender to me. When we see Krishna as parent and loving parent, then we would hear and it would get to our hearts what he is saying, that we should really, really depend on him. He never interferes with our literal independence. He never interferes in it. But this happens every minute of our lives. When we remember Krishna, in every situation, we say, please handle it the way you see best. That kind of prayer, we don't have to pray the whole day like that, but it would be nice if you could, but at least in the morning before you start your day, dedicate the whole day to the Lord. And when that is done, then there's not so much doubt about how things are going to play out. If you really, really, really have faith in the Lord and you pray like that, then you have literally submitted yourself or surrendered yourself to the Lord for the day. And do that every day. And when that happens, then fear, Krishna is the master of fear. And so everything comes from him. And so in that situation, it helps us to remember situations that we face during the day. And all of that's okay, I prayed that prayer, the Lord is in control. And that gives the satisfaction which pushes away fear. But for a materialist, they go through life in a very difficult way. And if they work hard to accumulate some material things, then they are afraid of death coming to take it all away. As Srila Prabhupada explains the Pavargas, Pa, Pa, Ba, Pa, and Ma. He explains Pa as working hard, and a lot of people do that, work very hard, and as Kali Yuga progresses, they will find they have to work even harder. As people are deceived into thinking that in an electronic age, things will be easier. No, they haven't gotten easier. They've gotten faster, but it's still harder. So Pa is working hard. And Pa, P-H-A, working so much that our mouth even dries up. Sometimes we just feel so, at the end of the day, we feel so much work that we put in. And Srila Prabhupada makes that comparison to a horse. when a horse has worked very hard, it gets to a point where it's beginning to foam in the mouth. I can see that happen to a lot of race horses trying to win. Go through that problem. And ba means diminishing returns. You don't get much. You're a Shudra working for some person who is in business, and they take the bulk of the money and give little. As a matter of fact, as Kali Yuga progresses, the employers give less and less and less to the employees. And the only time an employee gets some money that's a little more is when they fight the situation and the employer realizes that if I lose this person, I will lose a lot of profit that could come to me. Then and only then would the employer consider giving some more money after the employee has gotten some sort of legal advice and some pressure to be put on the employer to give me more. If I leave, well, too bad. So on the average, people get diminishing returns. And that's why there are others who try to travel to countries where there may be a little bit more of return for their work. The United States being one place like that. But it's all because of diminishing returns. Not much is given to the employee after working so hard and foaming in the mouth. And people are fearful, just like the Dhritarashtra was fearful. Fear comes because of uncertainty about what's going to happen. Fear about being kicked out of where we live because we can't pay the rent. Fear of being wealthy and somebody taking, or the government making some kind of decision that takes a lot of the wealth away. This is all constantly what's going on in the world. And that's why people want to get to positions of power so that they can try to overcome this, be in control. But as Srila Prabhupada later on describes, being a king in the material world is false in terms of you having complete control over things. No one does, even a king. So ba is fear, and ma, mrityu, death, comes at the end. And that's what was waiting for the Dhritarashtra. And so Vidura came to help him to realize. So this time, everything that Vidura told him to make life easier and more manageable for the Dhritarashtra, he didn't listen to it. But in a situation that had happened where what he wanted, he couldn't get because Duryodhana was dead and all the sons were dead. And if there was somebody to even hand over the power, it wouldn't be his sons. That's been taken away from him. He still was trying to hang in there, trying to hang in the palace. So people work very, very, very hard. Even big businessmen. Yet they eat a piece of dry bread and a cup of tea. Sometimes their situation, their health is so bad, they're making all this money, but they can't really, their health won't allow them. So it's a shame, it's a mockery. As a matter of fact, one of the Hollywood actors, quite popular, happened to make friends with a devotee. And I found out about that because of one comment that he made, because the devotee introduced him, as you might expect, in an ISKCON devotee, to Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. So this guy is the actor as a male, on the male body, read through it, and one day, after all the wealth that he made and the popularity that he had, he said, so this material life is a trick. It's a trick that God has played for us, on us. So what he meant, and when he explained further, I realized that what he was saying, it's a trick in that you expect to live such a wonderful life once you become popular and rich, And he was in that position, and he was realizing that his life was not as wonderful as he thought. He had problems in his marriage, problems with his children, and then later on, there was a situation that caused him actually to be banned even. So he's not acting right now. But I think it's Krishna's arrangement. Seriously think it's Krishna's arrangement, because from then he started taking spiritual life seriously. And of course, because he started taking spiritual life seriously, and this world doesn't talk too much about spirituality, not the mainstream media, so now his name doesn't appear very much. But actually, he's now under the shelter as a bhakta for one of our gurus in this context. Don't mention names, but he's actually fortunate from a spiritual standpoint. He doesn't have to be fearful anymore. So, Krishna is in control. As he says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 10, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Shriyate Sacharacharam, Itinanena Konteya Jagat Viparivartate. Material nature is just one of Krishna's energies, and is working under his direction. So he is the real controller. He produces moving and non-moving things all under Krishna's instruction and Krishna's powers. And Krishna's set up everything through his expansions for the manifestation of both material and spiritual. So the material world created and annihilated, all by Krishna's will. Therefore, for a small situation, like what was to happen on this one planet in the entire material creation, that was nothing for Krishna. One planet, Earth, and who was to be the king, everything works under the supreme will of the Lord. And if we remember that, then our own tiny life too, we would say, okay, it works on the supreme will of the Lord, and the Lord says, go to spiritual master and the Shastra and learn from people who are fixed up, who are experienced in spiritual life. You do that, and you're on your way back to Godhead. So the Lord's supreme will is what controls everything, even though he himself is in the background of this material manifestation. But the management is conducted by material nature, and the demigods, as you well know, have been given positions to get the material wonderful activities going on. Now, wonderful, we say in quotes because, of course, people are learning what their sinful reactions and reactions for good deeds give them, good and bad karma. So everything is under the Supreme Lord's control. And when the Lord himself came as Lord Ram, his leaving for the forest was also part of his own plan, even though it was set up in such a way that a lot of lessons could be learned about how to do good, and when you do bad, what happens to him, to a person who does that. Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, text 4, Krishna is saying, he is the root of everything, the seed-giving father. Savayoni Shukanteya, Bhutaya Sambhavantiya, Tasham Brahma Mahadyonir, Aham Bija Pradapita. It should be understood that all species of life, O Arjuna, O son of Kunti, they are made possible by birth in this material nature, and then I am the seed-giving father. So when everything comes from Krishna, as he's saying, there's no reason to turn anywhere else. So we are fortunate that in this Kali Yuga, we have been given a way in which we can connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So much mercy is built into this process. First of all, we have material eyes. We don't have spiritual eyes. We can't see the Lord, but the Lord has come in the form of the deity so that we can serve, we can see and serve the deity. Even if we can't see deeply because we don't have the eyes tinged with the salve of love, still we can recognize where to serve when the deity is there. The deity can be in our homes, the deity can be in the temple where we can associate and also serve together. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is all mercy. This is all mercy. Remember, the material world is jail. And when some boons or few things are given to those in jail, they should consider it that that's their fortune. So for the Lord to appear in a deity form, that is our fortune. It's added onto the services that we can have, because remember, this age is Kali Yuga. And the Yugadam is the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We still have deity worship. Deity worship is the Yugadam for Dwapara Yuga. Deity worship. Still, we are in the beginnings of Kali Yuga. So it's like borderline just coming into Kali Yuga. And so deity service is still being done along with the chanting of the holy name. So we're very, very, very fortunate. And as the Prabhupada says, if you're fortunate, what do? You take advantage of it. But we all should take advantage of it. This time, even if you don't have a deity, you can have the picture of a deity and frame it nicely and worship a deity, and that still counts. Even for Lord Chaitanya's situation, the Gonitai don't even have to be installed in your house. You can still worship like that. The rounds don't have to be 64. 16 minimum is good enough. So we have so much that's been given to us and so much leeway to go back to the spiritual world that's been made available through the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. Again, as the Prabhupada says, one should take care, to connect with it and take advantage of it. So, as Sri Prabhupada says in the purport, cruel death cares for no one. Maya is also, as my Guru Maharaj likes to put it, an equal opportunity employer. He turns away from nobody. So those are the two situations. Maya doesn't turn away from anyone, and cruel death doesn't turn away from anyone. So that's our situation. So when we take shelter of the supreme loving parent, Krishna, then we're saved from Maya, because Krishna is light and Maya is darkness. And when we do that, then when death comes, it's Krishna in disguise coming to take us back home. That is our situation. So the protection is there, and the fortune is also there to go back home. So everyone in the royal palace, Sri Prabhupada says, Maharaji Drashtra, and all others who were in the palace knew of the wisdom of Vidura. So when he came and started speaking, even though it was directed at Dhritarashtra, everybody was also listening. And the advantage to that was to be disconnected from materialism. Dhritarashtra was very much materialistic. He was selfish. By his own karma, he had become blind. And even asked Krishna how that happened. And Krishna explained to him. He said 50 lifetimes ago, Dhritarashtra was in a body, male body, hunter. He went to the forest. There were birds, 100 little birds and their mother bird in a nest. And he, for just target practice, shot a flaming arrow, an arrow with fire at the tip, into the nest, set the nest on fire, and got all 100 birds, little birds, killed. Their mother flew away, but their mother was blinded by the fire. So the mother saved the life, but she had to live the rest of her life with blindness. And so that particular act matured 50 lifetimes later on. That is the reaction for it. And that's why he was born blind. So when he asked, gee, I could have been the king. I'm the oldest among the three brothers, but I'm the one that's blind and therefore couldn't take the throne. Of course, you're blind. How can you lead a whole army to war and so on, where the kings were doing that? So for good reason, he was bypassed. But when a person is materialistic and an opportunity to win big for good reason is taken away, some people, they will maybe, outwardly make you think that, all right, it's all right, I can understand it. But then inwardly, you become envious. And they become very, 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 they become like they don't want to accept in their hearts that the truth is in fact what the situation is. He's blind and therefore a good decision has been made. And after that, he lived his whole life like that, trying to get it changed. And so it's interesting that Vidura comes and then he tells Dhritarashtra, Rajan, O king. The Papa comments on that too. What king? He had lost everything. Yeah, he could have stayed king if he wanted to, but for what? He was old, and there was nobody in his own direct family to hand over the throne to. What he wanted to do was all gone. So clearly, he had to accept, he had to learn the hard way, a very hard way, that the decision that was made to have Pandu be the king and continue his lineage was what was going to happen. And at some point in the war, he was blaming, he says, Krishna is the one that caused the war to happen. Even Gandhari also said that Krishna was the war, what caused the war to happen. But Krishna also, that part they don't say is, Krishna was the one that came as a messenger, the second messenger. Dhritarashtra was first met by a messenger arranged through the Pandavas. And then Krishna came himself. And he said, I don't have any message from Yudhishthira, but I can assure you, Dhritarashtra, that whatever I decide here, if I tell them, they will abide by it. And he asked for minimum, the whole world. Imagine 5 villages, or a person that could rule the whole world just being given 5 villages. Yet, Duryodhana did not want it, and his father did not stop him. And so this is the result. If some things are good for us and we turn our heads away from it, then we have to learn the hard way here in this jail, because this is where you learn things. So he was blind from birth, so he was disqualified from his rightful claim. And that was his own karma that was playing out at that time. Had he not been a hunter that just played with the lives of those birds, this would not have happened. So there's nothing wrong, nothing, when it comes to the way karma plays out. So they tried so much to get the Pandavas to be killed or somehow prevented from being the next people, the 5 brothers with the eldest one, Yudhishthira, to be the next king. But Krishna is supreme. Everything happens by his will. So whatever they tried, it failed. So Dhritarashtra still wanted to be king. Even after losing everything, HG Papa says, men and money. Men, the soldiers, and so much that they spend because of the war. He still wanted to remain king. So now Vidura had to come and wake him up from his slumber of a mental disease of wanting to be king when he wasn't qualified to be. And the situation has played out that he should have known to leave it, the whole kingdom. He was getting old. He was getting old. And when you go to that, when you get to that situation, you have to be thinking more, not about material things, how to put material things aside, not to make it so important in one's life, but to focus more on the spiritual. Sometimes younger people do not think about old age, but actually it is important to prepare for old age materially and spiritually. Because death doesn't necessarily come at old age. Sometimes it comes at a younger age. And when a young person is unprepared, then that can also be a problem. So it is important to prepare at any time. And especially for one's next life. If there is anything in this material world that a person desires to do, and that desire is strong, they should tackle that thing and get it done and get it out of the way. Because it is not good to be lying on a deathbed and thinking, oh, I should have done this, oh, I could have done this, and I didn't. As soon as you start thinking that way, then you're sending the subtle body into, you're setting up to send the subtle body into a situation where you'll be born again just to fulfill that thing that you said a lifetime you didn't get to do. So whatever it is, material or spiritual activity, if it is very strong, then we have to get it done, because one has to be satisfied that the things that needed to be done in the material world have been done. And now when the time comes, we focus on Krishna, focus on the holy name, focus on getting back to Godhead, which is what Guru wants, which is what Krishna wants. As I said, the Krishna wants us home way, way more than we even want to leave this jail and go home. The problem really is we've been gone so long from a spiritual world that it is just hard to really get it that all our problems will be over when we go to the spiritual world. And then there's a group of people in this material world who don't even know the existence of the spiritual world. They just think they'll go to the higher material planets, but that doesn't end there. They don't know what happens there. The typical religionists is like that. And that's why Krishna says, Sarvadharmam Parityaja, just get rid, abandon. Now that you know bhakti, devotional service to the Lord, do not stay in a religious situation. Do not ask demigods for material things. Just come to Krishna and surrender to Krishna, and he's got you taken care of. And fear doesn't have to play a role in one's life anymore. So we have so much to learn from these things that Srila Prabhupada explains. Krishna is controller. Krishna is, material energy is just one of his energies and working under his direction. And if we understand that, then understanding that he is the ultimate controller of all things that happen. And he's also a well-wishing friend. And then if we understand this, that he is a controller, everything comes from him, all sacrifices have to be given to him. This is where our happiness is. And when our peace comes from that, then we are in the right frame of mind. So he's a seed-giving father. He's the one in control of everything. And we don't have to fear when we surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is, it's very important in our lives, whichever way it is described to us, we have to hopefully be or have that as the major riding affair in our minds and in our hearts. That we have to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by serving according to the instructions of Guru, being very compassionate towards devotees, being helpful towards devotees. As a matter of fact, one of the best things to do is to make sure that you give help to a devotee every single week, if not every single day. Gotta try to give help. And when you begin to think about how to give help, then one thing that becomes important is when we're having conversations with devotees, we should listen very intently to what they're saying, because within the conversation comes the places where help is needed. And once you make a note of that, and without even saying to the devotee, you plan to give some help to that particular devotee, Krishna becomes very pleased, because the devotee will be pleased and they will know that another devotee has helped them, and the devotee is in this particular institution, society. They will get pleased with that person. The relationship between us and that person will definitely be the best. It will improve. And also, on top of that, they will not want to get out of the society that that person is in. Because help is coming, and a reminder about Krishna is coming from devotees. and the spiritual life is led by the devotees, and therefore you are in a right association, and it's an opportunity to go back to Godhead after we leave this body also. Why would we want to go anywhere else? So it all depends on how we relate to devotees and how much help that we give each other. Then, when all of that happens, and of course, there are negative things that have to be avoided: the criticism, the anger, the gossiping, the envy. They all have to go. They all have to go, because they actually put us down and give us spiritual debits instead of spiritual credits. So all of those are important that we have to take into consideration and remain humble. And remain humble, knowing that we have to be under the shelter of Krishna and Krishna's devotees, so that we don't become like, oh yeah, I can make my own decisions about everything. Yeah, you can think that way, but then unfortunately, lessons come that are not so wonderful, and you begin to realize we don't have control over everything. We really don't. As is described, finally, we make that point about a false king. The Prabhupada says, a king in the material world is false. Well, the king position is there, so why would Srila Prabhupada say that that's false? False in terms of not having full control over everything. A king feels like when they make a rule, it should be accepted by the people, therefore they have complete control. There may be some control, but it's very limited. One has complete control. The one who has complete control is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is under his rule. So a false king in the material world, that's how Srila Prabhupada describes it. And Dhritarashtra was particularly reminded of this false position and of the factual fearful happenings and events which had already approached him. First, he had cried so much because he's lost all his 100 sons, for one. And now he's still blind. He can't take anybody anywhere. On top of that, he's gotten old. And the people did, in fact, want Pandavas to be ruling, and that's what had happened. So what kind of king is he now? He has no control. He has no control. We don't have to live a life to get to the point where we're reminded how little control we have over things. If we surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take our sadhana seriously, then we are in a situation where we're always protected. Just like children who are in uncomfortable situations and will know to run to their parents for help. So, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. And the text is Vidura, the great advisor, came to tell Dhritarashtra to get out and go to the next stage of his life, because he's no longer king, even though it was sarcastic. He says, my dear king, but actually the king was Maharaj Yudhishthira. And fear was coming. So much had been lost by Dhritarashtra, at least his spiritual life. And Vidura was there to make sure he turned his attention to, so that that soul could be saved. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, are there any questions or comments in today's discussion? Hare Krishna. So Ram Shyam Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Nice, really wonderful session today. Like as usual, you made many points, given practical points, even, like how we can avoid the life Dhritarashtra lived, fearfulness, So it was really, really wonderful. And you told the story of how in the past life, Rashtra did the misdeed so that he is suffering in his life. So one question, Prabhuji, I was wondering, I researched many places, even I was looking for this, many places in different versions, this his past life mentioned, like sometime, somewhere it is mentioned, like as you told, like he used the arrow of the burning, fire, and it from that tree, and 100, kids in the of the birds in
Bird.
the they got killed, and that mother got blind. This version, and same time, sometime it is also mentioned, like like once there was huge, rain in that country, in that his Dhritarashtra's Rashtra, means that state, in that country where he was ruling, and there was nothing to eat on that time. So, like without informing, his cook, that started giving the egg of this bird, who had handed over, saying that I have no place to live, and I am giving you for some time, handing over you for some time, and we will be flying in some other country, and after this calamity will go off, this rain and all will go off, then we will return back, and this will take these eggs. So his cook started giving daily one by one, like, because nothing was accessible, and he was, giving. So Dhritarashtra liked that. Oh, it is so delicious. You keep giving daily this food. So he was bound to give that. Otherwise, he could be got punished. That cook could be punished. So in that way. So this is another version. So what I am asking is there in Mahabharata or somewhere it is there is a reference these two I mean the story you told, or a story, the second story, I did not find Prabhuji, or is that the Guru Varga and others, like the senior Vaishnava, they say we also understanding in that way. But I was looking for the reference, Prabhuji.
Yeah, I don't know this particular story about the eggs, but I was listening quite closely, when you were talking about that. I'm not definitely expert on Mahabharata, but as the Prabhupada says, we focus more on Bhagavad Gita, which is what Krishna's instructions are in the Mahabharata before the war. But even if the story has some merit to it, because you said you couldn't find a reference to it, I don't see how it connects to the 100 birds, because if Dhritarashtra was taking the eggs and being cooked, and I'll give you a chance to explain it a little more, being cooked, then in my small mind, the eggs could not hatch into birds when they get eaten. Okay, that's the first issue that I have with that. So I don't know how the story really fits the karmic situation, except to say, of course, we are protected from situations like this because we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs ourselves. So that's not something that, if we follow what the regulatory principles are, we'll have to deal with. But yeah, my where I got stuck with, trying to even come up with some commentary on it was, the fact that, of course, an egg that's eaten doesn't produce a bird anymore. And so if you can comment on it a little more, you definitely, please do. But I also am aware that you said you can't find a reference to it. So, for what it's worth, you can comment if you want to. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah.
All right. So actually, the part that matters most is Dhritarashtra's blindness, because that's what he actually, because he inquired about it, and Krishna told him. Actually, when we inquire so much about why we're still in the material world, we're going to be very disappointed about things that we did in previous lives. I mean, this is a situation where sometimes even those who can see previous, present, and future lives, those who are gifted in that way, metaphysically, tend not to talk about the things that are negative that they see. Even though it's there, they see, they can read about a person, they may give some sort of advice for protection for those things without coming right out and saying that this is what happened. But, in previous lives, if we spent in this material world previous lives, and we didn't go back to the spiritual world, then it means that we all have some things that we did that would really surprise us if we were told in previous lives that we were actually like that. But does that all matter? Well, Guru has put all of that behind due to initiation, and now we have an opportunity to go back. Krishna also said we go back to the spiritual world, we don't return to this material world. So that all should give us the impetus to take this life seriously so we can go back to Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, absolutely, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for explaining. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to the Prabhupada. Any other commentary or question?
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for the
Hare
nice class.
Krishna.
And sometimes, Krishna sends the message that he tries to correct us.
Yes.
Even then, if we don't correct, that is our bad luck.
Well, we learn about that in life. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He may not come directly in front of us.
Yeah.
But through somebody, he sends the message. Still, if we don't want to get it, then that is unfortunate. So I felt that Dhritarashtra was, when he got the message from Vidura, he will take the action anyway. But if we don't take the action at that time, if we won't leave, then that is different thing.
Actually, everything is given to us for us to be able to get back to Godhead. So much has been provided to us. If only we will take, we'll be aware of what's there for us, opportunity. But sometimes, the thing is, Maya is very active too. Never stop. Maya is very active too. So we got to really, but Maya is there for our purification. Maya is not there to stop us from going back to the spiritual world. Maya is there to point out our lower nature in so many ways so that we can overcome it and have better control of our senses so that we can go back to Godhead and be like those who are already there, who are in full control and pure in their actions and also in their words. So that's what Maya's function really is.
Yeah. But we if we say that no, Maya did it. That's why I did it like that. That's not an excuse. Is that right?
It's not. And Gugubina Maharaj said sometime back when he came, in the lecture. One time I had opportunity to hear him directly. He was saying that we should not blame Kali Yuga for the foolishness that we ourselves get ourselves into.
That's what it is.
He says, don't blame Kali Yuga for your own folly. And he was laughing when he said that, but he was dead serious about it. Don't turn it to someone, oh, Kali Yuga's like that. Oh, Maya is like that. But yeah, Maya is the way she is, but she's to help us to improve. So we got to be in control of our words and our actions so that we learn how to live a sadhu's life so we can go back to God. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any other comments or questions? Mataji, can you mute? Yeah, because there's some background noise. Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay. So I don't hear any comment now. So this is Monday, and usually Monday at 5 o'clock, there is the Bhagavad Gita happy hour, or happy, sometimes almost an hour, but happy half hour. And that will start at 5 o'clock today. So if you have time, please come hear more nectar, reading of the Bhagavad Gita and discussion for about 10 minutes or so after the reading. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatu.
Patitanam pavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
namo
namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhuji, for a wonderful.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Glory to the Prabhupada.